Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second lecture. Today, we're going to dive into families, how they're structured, how they function, and how they change over time. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of family life, we're going to talk theory, what it is, why it matters, and how sociologists use it to make sense of the world around us. Then we'll unpack 7 key sociological perspectives on family, each offering a different lens to view family dynamics. You might start wondering, which one is the right theory? Don't worry, we'll tackle that question too. After that, we'll shift into research methods. How do we actually study families? We'll compare ways of knowing, look at deductive versus inductive research, and talk about the importance of recognizing bias. And finally, we'll talk about ethics in research, why ethical standards matter, and how they protect both researchers and participants. Right, let's get started. Before we can understand how families work, we need a framework to guide our thinking. That's where theory comes in. A theory is essentially a tool. It links broad ideas about how society functions with the everyday behaviors and relationships we see around us. Think of it like a pair of glasses. It shapes what we notice, how we interpret what we're seeing, and how we make sense of it. In sociology, theories aren't just guesses or opinions. They're organized systems of ideas that help us describe patterns, explain social behavior, and that make predictions about how people or institutions might act under certain conditions. For example, a theory might help us understand why certain parenting styles are more common in some communities, or how economic stress affects marriage and divorce rates. Theorizing means thinking about the world in an intentional way, coming up with ideas that can help us notice patterns, ask the right questions, and connect the dots between individual experiences and larger social forces. Theories help turn everyday observations into meaningful insights. So when we apply theory to families, we're using it as a kind of roadmap to navigate complex questions. Why do people get married? Why do roles differ between partners? How do external pressures shape family decisions? Theories don't just give us answers, they give us better questions to ask. Now that we know what theory is, let's start with one of the classic sociological approaches, structural functionalism. This theory sees the family as a foundational unit of society that helps maintain social order. Think of the family as a miniature version of society, with each person playing a role that keeps things running smoothly. From this perspective, families function best when roles are clearly defined and everyone contributes in a predictable way. For example, the traditional view sees the father as the provider, focused on work and financial stability, while the mother is seen as the emotional support and caretaker. This model reflects what we often see in 1950s television shows, like Leave It to Beaver, where the dad goes off to work and the mom stays home to manage the household and care for the children. It's a very structured, predictable setup that aligns with the structural functionalist ideal, stability through role clarity. Of course, families today look quite different, but this theory helps us understand why traditional roles were so widely accepted and how those roles were thought to contribute to a functioning society. Structural functionalists also point to 3 major functions that families serve in society. The first is reproduction and socialization. Families are responsible for producing and raising the next generation, not just biologically through childbirth, but also socially by teaching children norms, values, and behaviors. From learning how to speak to understanding gender roles, most of our early social training comes from our families. The second function is economic support. Families are usually the first source of material support, providing food, shelter, clothing, and financial stability. This can include parents working to support children, extended families sharing resources, or even grandparents stepping in to help raise kids. In lower-income households, economic support might involve juggling multiple jobs or relying on community networks to meet basic needs. The third is emotional support. Ideally, families are a place of love, comfort, and trust, a place to turn during stress, loss, or celebration. Whether it's offering encouragement before a big exam or support after a breakup, emotional ties in the family play a huge role in helping us handle life's ups and downs. Taken together, These functions highlight why families are considered such a cornerstone of social life. They meet practical needs while also shaping who we are as people. Now let's switch gears and look at family through the lens of social conflict theory. This perspective sees society as a place where different groups compete for power and resources, and that includes within the family. Rather than viewing the family as a place of harmony and stability, this theory focuses on inequality and how family structures can actually contribute to maintaining systems of power, especially economic power. For example, think about how families raise children. From this point of view, families are essentially preparing kids to become future workers in a capitalist economy. They're taught discipline, punctuality, obedience, qualities that are useful in the workplace. So in a way, the family becomes part of the system that supports capitalism. We also see how inequality plays out between families. Families with wealth and access to resources can pass those advantages on to their children through better schools, extracurriculars, social connections, and more. Meanwhile, families without those resources often face barriers that are much harder to overcome. Taking this further, political economy, which fits under the conflict theory umbrella, argues that families aren't just reproducing labor power, they're also promoting consumerism. Think about how much of family life today is tied to spending, buying toys, clothes, devices, vacations, and even services like tutoring or therapy. Capitalism shapes what families think they need to be happy or successful. Advertising and media often suggest that love and success are tied to what we can buy. That pressure creates a cycle where families work harder to earn more, so they can spend more, often at the cost of quality time or emotional connection. So, conflict theory asks us to take a step back and question the systems we take for granted. Are families really serving the people in them, or are they being shaped to serve larger economic and political systems? Next, we'll explore how gender influences our understanding of family life. Feminist perspectives focus on how family roles are shaped by gender norms and how these roles often reflect and reinforce inequality. A central point in feminist theory is that women's contributions in families have often been ignored or undervalued. Traditionally, men's roles, like earning money, have been seen as more important or real work, while women's unpaid labor, cooking, cleaning, caregiving has been taken for granted. Feminist theories also emphasize that gender is not just a personal identity, it's a core way that society is organized. The expectations we have for men and women aren't biological, they're social. We're taught them from a young age, and they're reinforced in everything from media to religion to family practices. But here's something important. Feminist scholars say we can't look at gender roles in isolation. How someone experiences gender depends on other factors like race, class, sexuality, and geography. For example, what's expected of women in rural Canada might differ significantly from women in urban areas or different cultural communities. That's why feminist theory rejects the idea that there's only one right way to be a family. Instead, it recognizes a wide variety of family forms: single-parent families, same-sex couples, extended households, blended families, and more. At its heart, feminist theory is about change. It's not just describing inequality, it's calling for action to create fairer systems in which everyone, regardless of gender, has equal access to opportunities, resources, and respect. While feminist perspectives focus on women's roles, masculinity studies shift the focus to men, not just as powerful figures, but as people shaped by social expectations. Masculinity is not something we're born with, it's something we're taught. From early on, boys are encouraged to be tough, self-reliant, emotionally controlled, and dominant. These traits are reinforced by families, schools, media, and peer groups. These expectations shape how men approach everything from dating and parenting to work and friendships. For instance, many men are taught not to show vulnerability, which can make it harder to connect emotionally in relationships. Masculinity is also closely linked to power and, in some cases, violence. The cultural pressure to appear strong or in control can lead to aggressive behaviors or even abusive dynamics in some relationships. Masculinity studies examine how these norms contribute to broader social issues like gender-based violence or inequality in the workplace. Fatherhood is another key area. For a long time, being a good dad mostly meant being a provider, but those expectations are changing. Today, we're seeing more involvement from fathers in caregiving, emotional bonding, and daily parenting. Masculinity studies help us understand how these shifts are happening and where resistance to change still exists. Feminist theory also sheds light on how women's unpaid labor affects their economic well-being. Many women reduce work hours, take lower paying jobs, or leave the workforce altogether to care for children or aging parents. This leads to lower lifetime earnings, fewer retirement benefits, and greater vulnerability in old age. So when we talk about gender and family, we're not just talking about who does the dishes. We're talking about how deeply gender roles impact people's life chances, financial security, and emotional well-being. Let's now talk about intersectionality, a concept that helps us understand how multiple parts of a person's identity interact with each other. The basic idea is this: we can't fully understand someone's experience by looking at just one category, like gender or race. Instead, we have to look at how these categories overlap. For example, being a woman is one thing. Being a Black woman is another. Being a queer, working-class immigrant woman is something else entirely. Each layer of identity brings its own challenges and opportunities, and these layers interact in complex ways. Someone might face racism, sexism, and classism all at once, and those forms of discrimination can't be separated neatly. Intersectionality asks us to consider these multiple identities at the same time. It helps us avoid oversimplified explanations and instead see people as whole, complex individuals navigating systems that affect them in unique ways. In the context of family, this might mean recognizing that a single mother living in poverty will face very different pressures than a wealthy married mother in a different community. Intersectionality gives us the tools to better understand those differences and create more inclusive research, policy, and practice. Now we'll turn to symbolic interactionism, a perspective that looks at how these social realities are built through everyday interactions. Symbolic interactionism says that social phenomena, including family life, aren't just natural. Now let's zoom in from big picture theories to a more intimate level with symbolic interactionism. This perspective is all about the day-to-day interactions we have with each other and how those shape our understanding of the world, including what family means. Symbolic interactionism suggests that family life isn't fixed. It's created through ongoing communication, shared meanings, and social exchanges between members. So even something that feels natural in a family, like who does what chores or how parents discipline kids, is actually something we learn and negotiate through experience. Families, then, are not static structures. They're living, changing systems shaped by every conversation, routine, and small act between members. For example, the way a parent responds to a child's question or how siblings learn to share space. These everyday interactions shape long-term relationships and family norms. This theory also helps us understand how people define their roles in the family. A father may see himself as the protector, but that idea isn't just inherited. It's built through interactions with his children, his partner, and even through cultural symbols like media images of fatherhood. Symbolic interactionism also helps us make sense of how families use religion, especially in times of loss. Take a funeral, for instance. The rituals, prayers, services, memorials are full of symbols that help people process grief and make meaning out of something painful. These rituals don't just offer comfort, they reinforce shared beliefs and emotional connections among family members. So, from this view, families are constantly creating themselves through the ways they talk, act, and relate. That's why each family is unique and why what feels normal in one family might seem totally unfamiliar in another. Let's now explore social exchange theory, another micro-level perspective that focuses on individual decision-making within relationships. This theory says that relationships are built on a kind of mental cost-benefit analysis. People constantly evaluate their connections by asking, what am I getting from this? What am I giving? Is it worth it? In families, this plays out in many ways. Think about a couple deciding who does which chores or who stays home with the kids. Often, these decisions aren't random. They're based on an unspoken negotiation of effort and reward. If one partner feels like they're doing all the work without appreciation or support, resentment can build. Social exchange theory also helps explain mate selection. When people choose a partner, they often weigh a mix of emotional, financial, and practical factors. Is this person supportive? Do we share the same goals? Are they attractive to me? Will this relationship make my life better or harder? It also helps us understand why people sometimes stay in harmful relationships. For example, someone in an abusive situation might not leave because they see the costs, like losing financial support, facing social stigma, or risking custody of children, as greater than the benefits of leaving. Emotional attachment and fear of being alone can also weigh heavily in these decisions. So, social exchange theory reminds us that family life often involves a balancing act. People are constantly making choices, big and small, based on what they feel they're giving and receiving in return. Let's now look at the family development perspective, which focuses on how families grow and change over time. This theory sees the family as a dynamic unit that moves through predictable stages, kind of like chapters in a book. Each stage brings new tasks, roles, and challenges that families must manage together. For example, early marriage is often marked by high marital satisfaction. Couples are typically focused on each other and have more flexibility in how they spend their time and resources. But when children come along, satisfaction often dips. Parenting demands, financial pressure, and lack of time can cause stress and strain in the relationship. Later, when the children leave home, the so-called empty nest stage, many couples report feeling closer again. They have more freedom and time to reconnect. In older age, satisfaction can vary depending on things like health and income, but many couples describe a deeper emotional bond in later life. This perspective also includes a developmental task framework, meaning that each stage of the family life cycle comes with certain jobs families need to do to stay healthy and functional. For instance, new parents need to learn how to care for a baby, adjust their roles, and manage their time. Understanding family life through this lens helps explain why transitions like divorce, retirement, or the loss of a loved one can feel so disruptive. Families are not static. They're always adapting and evolving as members grow and circumstances change. Next up is the life course perspective, which expands the family development view by adding in the larger historical and social context. This theory asks us to look at how individual lives unfold over time, while also considering the impact of social structures, cultural norms, and historical events. So it's not just about personal growth. It's about how personal and societal timelines intersect. For example, someone growing up during a major economic recession may face very different life options than someone growing up during a time of economic prosperity. Even if two people make similar choices, the historical context can shape what's possible for them. This perspective also looks at how broader systems like education, healthcare, and labor markets affect family life. It helps explain why two families might experience the same life event, like retirement or the birth of a child, in very different ways based on their social location and the era they're living in. So the life course perspective gives us a more complete picture by linking personal experiences with structural forces. It reminds us that no one's story unfolds in isolation. Having traced the life course perspective's origins, let's see why it's now widely considered the top framework in family studies. Let's dig a bit deeper into why the life course perspective is so widely used in family sociology today. First, it highlights that lives unfold within a historical context. Whether it's a global pandemic, a war, or a tech revolution, major events shape what's possible for individuals and families at different points in time. Second, while people make their own choices, those choices are never made in a vacuum. The time and place someone is born into can expand or limit their opportunities. Think about how access to education or job training can differ depending on when or where someone grows up. Third, this theory emphasizes linked lives, the idea that our experiences are connected to those around us. If a parent loses a job, the impact ripples through the entire family. If a teenager becomes a parent early, it can shift responsibilities across generations. And finally, timing matters. A life event like becoming a parent at 20 has very different consequences than becoming a parent at 40. These timing differences affect emotional readiness, financial stability, and family dynamics. Since the life course perspective is so important in family studies today, let's dig into its main ideas, which help us study the mix of individual experiences and bigger social forces. The life course perspective also introduces several key concepts that help us analyze how people move through life. Cohorts and generations refer to people born in roughly the same time period. They tend to experience similar events like 9/11, the COVID-19 pandemic, or major shifts in technology that shape their outlook and decisions. Transitions are the specific changes we go through, like graduating from school, starting a job, or becoming a parent. Each transition marks a shift in our roles or responsibilities. Trajectories are the longer paths those transitions create, like the arc of someone's work life or their long-term relationship journey. Linked lives highlight how our relationships influence each other. For example, a sibling's illness might shape a person's career choices or living arrangements. Life events are major moments, both expected and unexpected, that leave a lasting impact. Think of events like a serious injury, divorce, or moving across the country. And turning points are those big shifts in direction that change the course of someone's life. Maybe it's changing careers, moving in with a partner, or deciding to go back to school later in life. Continuing with the life course perspective, let's look at how trajectories and transitions actually shape family relationships. Life isn't just a straight path. It's a mix of long-term patterns and big turning points. And how we move through those transitions depends on a lot of factors like income, education, and cultural expectations. For example, whether someone moves out of their parents' home early, late, or on time can have big implications. Leaving early, maybe due to conflict or a desire for independence, might create emotional distance or worry for the parents. Delaying that move because of financial pressure can lead to tension if expectations between adult children and parents don't line up. But when home leaving happens at a mutually agreed time and with open communication, it often strengthens relationships and supports a smoother transition into adulthood. The life course perspective helps us make sense of these moments. It shows how both personal decisions and larger social forces work together to shape how we grow, change, and stay connected with family. So far, we've looked at the big 7 sociological perspectives on families. But there are a few other theoretical frameworks worth mentioning, ones that either add depth to those theories or bring in fresh angles from other disciplines. First, social ecological theory. This perspective connects individual and family development with broader environmental influences, things like the neighborhood you live in, the policies that affect your school or workplace, or even environmental conditions like climate or housing quality. It's often used alongside the life course perspective to show how wider social and economic conditions shape family choices over time. For example, a family living in a high crime neighborhood may adopt very different routines and parenting styles compared to a family in a safer, more affluent area. Next, family systems theory. This theory sees the family as an interconnected system where every part affects every other part. So if one person is struggling, say with addiction, illness, or emotional distress, it often impacts the entire family unit. This theory is widely used in counseling and therapy, helping professionals understand how problems within families aren't isolated, but part of a larger system that needs attention as a whole. Then we have queer theory, which challenges the assumption that families must look a certain way, usually heterosexual, married, and nuclear. Queer theory highlights the wide variety of family forms, especially within LGBTQ+ communities, and questions why certain family models are seen as more legitimate or normal than others. It also explores how laws, institutions, and media can reinforce narrow ideas about what family should be. And finally, there's value in drawing insights from other fields. Biology contributes to our understanding of how genetics or health conditions affect family interactions, like hereditary illness or fertility issues. Psychology adds insights into emotional development, personality, and mental health, which all play a role in shaping family relationships. These interdisciplinary views don't replace sociology, they enrich it, giving us more tools to understand the full complexity of family life. Now that we've explored different sociological perspectives on family, you might be wondering, which theory is the right one? The short answer, there isn't one single correct theory. Instead, each theory is a way of thinking, or a type of discourse, that helps us make sense of family life from a different angle. At this point, you might be wondering, after all these theories, which one is actually right? The answer is, none of them are right in an absolute sense. Each theory offers a different way to look at families, and each has its strengths depending on what you're trying to understand. Theories are like lenses. They bring certain things into focus while leaving others in the background. Structural functionalism helps explain stability. Conflict theory focuses on inequality. Symbolic interactionism captures everyday behavior, and so on. Each one highlights something different. What really matters is how useful a theory is for your specific question or goal. If you're researching emotional bonds between parents and children, symbolic interactionism might be best. If you're analyzing how economic hardship affects parenting, conflict theory or political economy could be more helpful. To evaluate any theory, you can ask yourself a few key questions. Is it relevant? Does it apply to the group or situation you're studying? Is it practical? Can it be applied in real-life settings to solve problems or guide decisions? Does it make sense? Are its ideas logical and well-organized? Is it clear and specific? Are the terms and concepts well-defined? Can others use it consistently? If other researchers apply it, will they get similar results? Does it respect cultural differences? Some theories are rooted in Western ideas and may not apply universally. Instead of picking one theory to rule them all, sociologists often mix and match elements from different theories to get a more complete understanding of families. The best approach is flexible, choosing the right tools for the questions at hand. Now that we've explored theory, let's talk about how sociologists actually study families. Research is the backbone of sociology. It's what helps us move beyond assumptions and opinions to uncover what's really happening in the world. Family researchers ask questions like, how do parenting styles vary across cultures? What factors influence divorce rates? How does cohabitation affect long-term relationships? To answer questions like these, sociologists rely on a range of research methods. There are three main research approaches. Quantitative research uses numbers and statistics to identify patterns and general trends. It's great for measuring things like how many people cohabit before marriage or what percentage of families live below the poverty line. Qualitative research focuses on meaning and experience. It uses interviews, case studies, or observations to explore how people feel about their family roles or how they handle conflict. Mixed methods research combines both, using surveys to get the big picture and interviews to dig into the details behind the numbers. Each method has its own strengths. Surveys are efficient for gathering data from lots of people and identifying broad trends. Interviews let you hear personal stories and understand experiences more deeply. Observations are useful when you want to see behavior in action, like how parents and children interact in public spaces. Secondary data analysis saves time by using already collected data, like census results or health records, to find patterns. Case studies offer detailed insights into one family or a small group over time, especially helpful when studying unique situations. Experiments, though less common in this field, are used when researchers want to test specific hypotheses in controlled settings, like how different parenting styles affect children's responses in simulated environments. Choosing the right method depends on your question, your timeline, your resources, and the kind of information you want to gather. Often, the best insights come from combining several methods to get both the big picture and the personal side of family life. As the last part of today's lecture, we'll discuss the ethical side of conducting research on families. It might surprise you to learn that paying close attention to ethical issues is a relatively new development in the history of social science. Let's end with something that's absolutely crucial in family research: ethics. Studying people's private lives, especially something as personal as family, comes with serious responsibilities. Today, we follow clear ethical guidelines designed to protect participants. In Canada, for example, the Tri-Council Policy Statement outlines rules for ethical research with human subjects. These include getting informed consent, ensuring privacy, avoiding harm, and treating participants with respect. But it wasn't always this way. In the past, some studies crossed major ethical lines. One example is the Tea Room Trade Study from the 1970s, where the researcher observed people in public washrooms without their knowledge and then tracked down their personal information without consent. That kind of deception is no longer considered acceptable. Ethical research means being honest with participants, protecting their confidentiality, and always prioritizing their well-being. Especially when working with vulnerable groups like children, marginalized communities, people in crisis. It's critical to handle every step of the process with care and integrity. When research is done ethically, it not only protects participants, it also builds trust in the research itself. That trust is essential if we want our work to be taken seriously and to actually help improve people's lives.